much, Maddie, for joining us and sharing that insight all the way from Israel. Now we move on to Asia. In Gyeongju, South Korea, President Lee Jae Myung has formally asked U.S. President Donald Trump to allow South Korea access to fuel used in nuclear-powered submarines during bilateral talks on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. President Lee has emphasized that Seoul is not seeking nuclear-armed submarines, but rather nuclear propulsion to better track North Korean and Chinese vessels. Let's listen in.
추진 잠수함의 연료를 우리가 공급받을 수 있도록 대통령께서 결단을 좀 해주시면 좋겠습니다. 그래서 가능하다면 연료 공급을 허용을 해주시면 저희가 저희 기술로 재래식 무기를 탑재한 잠수함을 여러 척 건조해서 우리 한반도 동해 서해에 해역 방어 활동을 하면 미군의 부담도 상당히 많이 줄어들 수 있을 것이다라는 생각이 듭니다.
Lee has also asked for President Trump's support to make substantial progress on South Korea being allowed to reprocess spent nuclear fuel or an uranium enrichment. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us. Good to see you. Ross, what's the significance of this submarine fuel, and how can it help South Korea?
It's very significant. Anything that deepens the security relationship between South Korea and the United States is generally a win-win for both sides. They're already treaty allies. The United States is obligated to come to South Korea's aid in the event of an armed attack. Obviously, the threat is from North Korea. So again, anything that brings them closer together, enhances the relationship, brings them together for additional research and development, not things that are simply the sale of weapons, for example. This binds them together for what could potentially be a very long-term project. And I think that that's a win-win for both sides. Obviously, North Korea is going to react negatively to this if it proceeds, and China will criticize it as well, because China will say that it's further militarizing the Korean peninsula and the region, and China might see that as a threat, which is not a surprise. But if South Korea is willing to do this, and frankly, if South Korea is willing to spend money on this, then I think the Trump administration is going to be very receptive.
And Ross, this is huge, as you've also mentioned all the rightful reasons, and like knowledge sharing in terms of military. How do you think can U.S. benefit from this as well?
Well, first, again, there is the revenue opportunity. Any sale of U.S. technology to South Korea that might be approved under this arrangement would benefit U.S. companies. So that is a significant factor here as well. But again, any further integration of the national security and military establishments of the two sides, I think the United States wants that. There's been doubts. People often raise this about President Trump's commitment to security treaties, whether that's the bilateral agreements with countries like the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea, or NATO. The criticism of Trump is frequently that he's not committed to these agreements. But the agreements do exist. And if Trump is willing to put the U.S. government in a position where it's more closely engaged with South Korea for defense purposes, that's certainly going to be welcomed in South Korea. And there are going to be a lot of people in the United States who welcome that as well, whether that's members of Congress from both parties, foreign policy experts, scholars. I think generally this is going to be received very positively.
And Ross, lastly, does this change anything in terms of balance of power in East Asia, and what are the potential risks of allowing South Korea accessing to nuclear propulsion technology?
That's a really interesting question because, again, there's the likelihood that China is going to criticize this. What at the moment distinguishes South Korea from Japan is that Japan has been more willing to show its military capabilities further afield. There are the constitutional concerns in Japan and prohibitions about that, which the new prime minister, Takaichi Senai, is probably going to take a very aggressive approach. But up to now, South Korea has been more circumspect. For example, South Korea has been more cautious about sailing through the Taiwan Strait or sailing in the South China Sea or even joint exercises with the Philippines or other stakeholders in the region. But the main thing to watch here is going to be China's reaction. And then a secondary issue would be, will South Korea, with this ability, seek to project its power and its capability further afield from only its close-in waters?
With that, I would like to thank Ross Feingold for sharing that insight as a political analyst from Taipei. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news.